Okay, welcome to our weekly COVID-19 town hall, virtual town hall. I remind everybody that if you are logged in, you're welcome to email us at covid19.questions@chw.coos.or.us, as well as add questions into the live comment stream of the video. Today we have with us Brian Leone, our epidemiologist, Florence Portal-Stevens, our public health director. I am Eric Gleason, the public information officer, and Steve Takis, who is the C-Shift Battalion Chief at the Coos Bay Fire Department. Kelly Dion couldn't be with us today. So without further ado, I will bring up Florence Portal-Stevens, our public health director, to give you our weekly presentation. Oh, hey, and don't forget Barb, who is our sign language interpreter. Good job.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. So we've had a request that the presentation and the slides come back to the meeting, so we reduced it quite a bit, but thought we would put a few slides up. Oh, and I did not update those slides. So that's something else. Do you remember those numbers? We still have 0 positive cases.
I can get
them. I have them in front of me right there. Hold on. It's there. Whew, somewhat prepared. So, 0 positive cases as of today. 173 negative cases, 28 still pending results, total tested in Coos County of 201. What's happening right now is a little bit of a technical difficulty because the slides are actually way far from the podium and I'm having a hard time reading them. So what we wanted to point out was that in less than a month, Oregon went from 1 case that was detected, I believe, on March 3rd, to, as of today, 690 known positive cases of COVID-19. So that's quite a jump. So, of course, as you all know, the governor, in collaboration and under the guidance of the Oregon Health Authority and the CDC, have taken what's called mitigation measure to really try to slow the spread of coronavirus in the state of Oregon and hopefully flatten the curve so our hospital system doesn't get overwhelmed by a large influx of patients severely sick with COVID-19. At this time, I know that some questions are going to come around tonight about the amount of kits that are available in the community. So the number that I'll give you is going to probably seem like a lot, but in fact it's not, and we can explain to you why that is. So we still have a limited supply of test kits available for COVID-19. And the other thing I wanted to put out there is that we've spent, I would say, the past months definitely looking at preparedness and planning, making sure that we were all well aware of the ever-evolving testing criteria for COVID-19 and the case presentations and all that, which I think we have done a great job at as a community. And we're now looking at more of like moving from preparedness to response and really looking at what would it look like once we have cases, and how are we going to take care of those folks in our hospital setting, and possibly looking at some surge capacity, both in terms of location and personnel, and of course supply. So this slide is not updated either, but I have the update right here. So as of today, there were 690 positive cases in Oregon, 18 deaths, and over 12,000 tests that had been performed. Oh, I did it backwards. That was state first, and it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. So what we've been focusing on in terms of the response and the preparedness in the community at this point has been, of course, doing what public health does, which is epidemiology, contact tracing, and case investigation. We also have made ourselves available to our healthcare system and providers, as well as the public, for any questions that people have pertaining to the disease. We are facilitating a few task force. One of them most of them are around how do we take care of our most vulnerable people in those uncertain times. And so one task force focuses on the homeless population. One task force focuses on the elderly and people in poverty. And another task force is looking at working together as the healthcare response system. So it's mostly made of hospitals and clinics and, of course, the public health. We've been a point of distribution for PPE, that stands for personal protective equipment. We've been able to place quite a few resources through the Oregon state system, and I've been able to supply our partners with Oregon stockpile. We've also placed some PPE orders and are working with a few partners on 3D printing of N95 mask, as well as the making of hand sanitizer using our local distillery, which is really amazing. So there are a lot of people, coming to help. We're also having a lot of people in the community sewing masks, which has been also a great response. Another big focus of ours has been really trying to remain very transparent and communicating and educating and informing the community about what we know of this disease, and that's, I think, hopefully is being shown through this effort, our website, the press briefing that we are doing 3 times a week, and the social media presence that we also have. The last piece of focus has been around, coordinating and managing people who want to volunteer, and also making sure that we're assigning people where they're needed at this time. So just to recap on COVID, I'm sure everybody knows it by heart now, but okay, so COVID-19 transmits person to person via respiratory droplets, so meaning if I cough or sneeze within less than 6 feet than somebody, and I have COVID-19, which at this time I do not, I could possibly infect my neighbor. The symptoms are flu-like, fever, sore throat, cough. We also have GI symptoms that have been reported, shortness of breath, and fatigue, muscle pain. As you may or may not know, fever may not be present in the very young or older folks. And the most at risk are people older than 60, folks with immunocompromised systems, chronic conditions, and so on. The time it takes for the virus to express itself in the human body varies from 2 to 14 days. with an average of 5 days. All right. Okay, that's it. Now we are available for your questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. Denise has 2 questions. Her first question is, what do I tell my college kid when he argues with me about going to see his friends in town? I've told him it's not what we're supposed to be doing. The trips out should only be for essential work and occasional grocery trips. What does Denise tell her teen? College student, I guess maybe he's not teen.
Right. Well, I can start. Okay. Denise, first of all, I feel for you. I think a few things that you may want to tell him is, first of all, we live in that time where we're so lucky to have virtual capability like we're doing right now. And even though, it's hard not to see people in person, I think maybe video calls, things like that could be a good thing to do. I understand people have a hard time with the social distancing measures because it might seem irrelevant, maybe? I don't know. But what is very important for you to realize is that as we are seeing in the world and in various part of the country at this point, is that the virus transmits very rapidly and very easily between people, and that he could be, either carrying it without knowing, his friends could be carrying it without knowing, they could be, interacting not within the 6 feet of social distancing, they could be transmitting to one another and then go back to their households or their grandparents and then possibly exposing other people at this point. So I think maybe looking at it as maybe the grown-up thing to do, the responsible thing to do. I know it's hard. We want to go out. We want to hang out when we're young, and I think all of that could be done in a creative manner. But yeah, thinking outside of oneself at this point is what I would suggest.
Does that pretty much cover it, Brian?
Well, you asked for it. Here I am on camera. So I guess something I would add to that is there are often a lot of jokes about adolescents suddenly not listening, and that can carry on through college age. But essentially, there is actually a physiological reason why there's a lower perception risk among that age group. Just try to, your son better than we do. Just try to appeal to his intellect and try to talk to him about the fact that it may not appear there's much risk, but he just needs to look elsewhere and see some of the news reports about the hospitals that are jam-packed with folks that are having a really, really hard time and people are dying, and we certainly don't want that situation to occur around your son. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Denise has a second question. I'm seeing a lot of Washington and California license plates around town, more than usual. Is our community planning to address visitors coming to our area from hotspots? This concerns her deeply.
So I'd say there's a couple of different aspects to that. Number one, I do believe in certain jurisdictions there has been measures that have been taken to reduce the likelihood that someone is just going to come and visit and kind of ransack our stores. But the bigger issue, if there are certain folks that are worried about more of a disease transmission issue, then that's kind of a separate thing. One of the things that we consider when we're looking at investigations is where someone is coming from. I haven't really went into a whole lot of detail as far as what kind of questions are asked in a case investigation. We do, in addition to just finding out what their symptoms are, where they've been, we do try to elicit any relevant information about where they've traveled, whether they come into contact with other people that have traveled. So we do have a pretty good hold usually when someone has gotten ill to do a little bit of back tracing of where they've been or who they've been exposed to. So it's definitely a situation of concern. I resist the urge to worry necessarily about people that are driving into the area or single any particular persons out because they appear to be from outside. Remember, there are people that sometimes move to the area that don't necessarily get their license plates changed over right away or anything like that. But I think it's just important to consider that we just need to come together as a community and do what we can with ourselves and trust that the rest of us are doing everything we can to minimize the risk to our community.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I just had a thought to the first question, back to the college person. I think what I hear quite a bit or read in the questions that are being asked is that, there's no cases identified at this point in Cusco County, and therefore, we're safe. There are no cases that we know of, okay? In order for us to know what's up, we should be doing tremendous testing, but we do not have the capacity to do that. So I just wanted to put it out there in terms of like this. There is community transmission in Oregon, and if not already here, it's coming. So let's be mindful of that.
Okay, we have a couple questions surrounding tests, so I'm going to kind of lump them into a question versus a bunch of little ones. One of the listeners wants to know if we have any further information on when there will be more tests available, and one wants to know, do we have the new habit tests that can give results in just 15 minutes? Brian?
All right. So the habit test is actually one example of a serum or blood sample type test. There are a few others as well that have recently come on the radar. Hopefully, without getting too deep into the science part of this, normal testing that we've essentially been using, the CDC, commercial laboratories, state of Oregon, those tests are called polymerase. I'm not saying it right. The abbreviation is PCR. Essentially, it looks at the genetic material in a virus. And so you are actually looking at the virus, looking for a specific virus particle when you're running that test, essentially. The quick rapid tests are again, for blood sample type analysis, is actually looking for antibodies. So that can be problematic in some ways because there is a lot we don't necessarily know about this virus yet and how it behaves and how long it usually takes our bodies to start producing antibodies in enough volume to be able to be detected. So it's not just a matter of like how good this test is, but it's also a matter of when would be the opportune time in someone's transmission cycle to test for that. So there is certainly a reduced amount of sensitivity, meaning there is a higher potential for false negatives with these tests. So right now, we're certainly not looking at that type of test to be confirmatory in terms of saying, yep, this person has COVID-19. Now, there are other potential applications that could be beneficial to use a test like that. one of the things that we've been doing with our first responder community and other high-risk occupations is trying to determine, if someone has been exposed to an illness that could be COVID-19, when they should be taken out of work or brought back to work or whatever. So even one of the serum test manufacturers at this point has already talked about the fact that it's not meant to be a diagnostic test, but it could be used potentially to say, yes, this person is likely immune from COVID-19. They were ill at one point. And that means that they could probably back to work and there wouldn't be a concern about that individual transmitting disease. So the other aspect of this is, even though, there's a lot of numbers running around over the weekend about how many of these tests are going to be available, and there's, 50,000 or 100,000 or 500,000, remember there are hundreds of millions of people in this country. There's over 4 million people in Oregon, and so something in the neighborhood of tens of thousands of tests or hundreds of thousands of tests is really kind of a drop in the bucket, and still would not necessarily be beneficial for mass testing, at least right now. But it's a really, really good question. I'm glad everybody's getting really interested in the science for this, but it's not something that's probably going to be a huge help right this second.
While we're on the conversation of tests, Siobhan wants to know how reliable the test that they are currently using is.
Right. So that's a good question. We don't really have an exact number. The current test, again, is looking for, to be a little bit more specific, that test is able to find genetic material and just do a mass multiplication of that, basically creation of the same strand. And so it's really easy to spot once that process has gone through, and it's very unlikely that there would be a misdiagnosis at that point. It's probably not a 100% sensitivity, but high 90s for certain. But it's just one of those things where we're not able to be 100% sure now. Part of that also is there are many different ways to actually extract the respiratory fluids in order to be able to test, and some parts of our body, like the lungs, are much better at having a dense amount of virus if it's there. But those are also the areas of the body it's most difficult to get samples from. So part of the idea of determining how accurate a sample is or a test is how's the sample being collected, and there are a few other factors there. So that's why it's not necessarily 100%, but for the most part, very, very high sensitivity.
Okay, we have Melissa said that she had a test yesterday. And they were out on the nasal swab, so she had to do a throat swab. Is the throat swab as accurate as the nasal swab? Would you
know? All other things being equal, in terms of the skill of the clinician taking the sample and their experience and knowing exactly how to collect that sample, it is true there's likely to be a small decrease in sensitivity from an oral pharyngeal swab than a nasopharyngeal swab.
She said she's also concerned about 7 to 12 days going to take results.
Yes. I definitely understand that concern. I would say that, again, I'm assuming you're talking about a commercial laboratory at that point, and some of the laboratories have had that initial surge struggle of trying to keep up with just the sheer volume of tests that they were receiving. I do believe I've heard feedback recently that starting to get a little bit better. I certainly have not personally heard of 12 days. I do have a couple of samples that took that long, but there were extenuating circumstances. Typically, it's been about a week. It could be that they're just trying to give a max number of 12 days. But I have seen some commercial laboratory results back in less than a week, really recently. So hopefully they'll continue to improve.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Brian.
And by the way, I touched my nose a little bit ago.
Oh my gosh.
I'm really sorry about that. Not saying a good example, but don't touch your nose. I love it all.
Okay. Jeff has some questions. He has quite a few questions. Let's see. This is a lot. According to the Oregonian, of 60,000 people in Coos County, 16,000 are 65 and older. That is a large percentage of the population that are the most vulnerable category. Modeling information is OHA providing county and are their projections matching up against the county resources. For example, the IHME at University of Washington is saying Oregon's peak will be in early May, and we have enough beds, etc., to meet the need. Does the OHA modeling agree with this?
So OHA did commission some modeling to be done. To my knowledge, I don't believe they have done modeling in-house right now. Based on some of the data that we have, keep in mind a lot of those modeling examples that you mentioned, they are starting off with an assumption of the number of true infections, may not confirm cases, how many infections they believe are currently in the community. So right off the bat, that's a little bit of an assumption, and then there are really just a tremendous amount of variables that go into community transmission like this. Geographical barriers, of course, all of the measures that have been taken in the state to reduce the amount of social interaction is a big one, and so you're also trying to predict how well people abide by those guidances. It's kind of different. If you've noticed, I'm trying to get too into the science here, but the confidence intervals that those graphs are usually displaying have just an absolute massive minimum, maximum as far as the potential range that their modeling is offering. And any time that you're making assumption on top of assumption, that is the case. That being said, that type of information is absolutely better than blind blind. So I would say, because there wasn't at least enough community transmission for us to have nailed down confirmed cases at this point, and because a lot of social distancing orders and that nature were put into place before that happened for us, there is a pretty good chance that if we continue to be vigilant and continue to keep that social distance, that absolutely our hospitals and our healthcare system will not be overwhelmed. I really talk about modeling, but I do it for an hour. We don't have the time. So.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Eric has a question for Steve. How are first responders managing with so much uncertainty around their calls?
So first responders throughout the county have been very involved with what's happening here at Coos Health Wellness. The regular meetings and the collaboration that has come from that has given us a bit of information to work with. And with that, we are taking different precautions when we respond. I believe that all of the agencies in the county are still responding to all 911 calls, but there is some changes in how they're responding. Our inspectors are asking some additional questions to try and give the responding crews information as far as what PPE or personal equipment we need to wear. And then once we arrive on scene, there's an even more tiered response. We're not sending 3 or 4 people through the door. We're particularly sending one person through the door to do an even better assessment, limit the number of people potentially exposing, limit the amount of PPE we're bringing through, and making those assessments at that time, how many people we need, and then going from there.
Thank you. So Sherry has a question. She says, hi, any idea when the app test will become available? Is that the app one? Is that what we're talking about? Or is it a different one? So on. Also, any idea roughly how much it will cost? I'm really disappointed how few tests have been done in Coos County. I understand why, but I believe it's giving the people in the county a sense the virus is not here. Also, I hate when this makes a point of saying people who have died from virus have underlying conditions. Gives younger people the sense that they'll be fine, and so they are ignoring the stay at home order. What are your thoughts?
First of all, I absolutely agree. There has not been enough testing in Coos County or Oregon or the United States. That is certainly a consistent problem everywhere at this point because of how we've seen the growth of cases. Again, public health would certainly be advocates for much more broader testing capacity there. Should we go back to the first question, the home test and things like that. At this point, the serum testing that is available that I'm aware of has been more of an earmark through the regular medical supply distribution option. I'm not really sure of which exact test is off as an at-home test specifically, but most of those serum tests are tests that are fairly straightforward, like a type thing for just like a blood sugar test, for example, as far as the complicated or the lack of complication. But yeah, no idea for cost or anything like that right now. Yeah, I also do share concern that there are younger folks that are relatively healthy. They don't seem to think of themselves as vulnerable to the virus, but I can certainly tell you that just by, it doesn't take much to look around the internet and get first-person accounts of people that are in their 30s or 40s with no chronic health issues whatsoever that are getting hit very hard by this illness. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about vulnerable populations, we're talking about trying to ensure that the folks that are going to have the hardest time, trying to protect as much as possible this disease. But yeah, it would be an absolute mistaken error to think that just because 30 or 20 or 40 and don't have any underlying health condition that can cause problems that get COVID-19 would be a walk in the park, because it's absolutely not, and there absolutely have been people that have died. It's just an element of risk, really, as far as the likelihood you would suffer severe complications.
So we're being made aware that there are some connectivity issues and audio issues. So bear with us when we try to figure it out.
had to go in and find the comments. I think what is open up another version of the.
Right. Yeah.
I was still translating all the things. Only people get anything this far are the people who spend over harvest.
Oh, but I think it's done. Restart.
Well, if I can find it, then we should have restarted. But let's see.
Should we just restart?
I think we're gonna start. Yeah.
Okay, so what we do is we're gonna end the stream, then restart it. Sorry